folks, welcome to BBD Geopolitics on this cold Sunday morning. It was a wet evening, and it's apparently the wettest wettest January in a long time. And as we go down to geopolitics, what do we have everywhere, right? What do we have? Biggest problem right now seems to be in Ukraine, and that could have an interesting impact, or actually a debilitating impact on India. Is going to have a really tough balancing act. Is Ukraine? Let's see why that's going to be the case, right? And what do we have here, right? U.S. lethal aid starts arriving in Ukraine. First shipment includes ammo for frontline defenders as Russia toughens its posture amid border buildup. Germany encouraging Putin, says Ukraine. The German defense minister was in India. What did he say? Delhi, Berlin need Russia against China, says German Navy chief. Then you have severe response if Russia sends troops to Ukraine, says Bilkin. US, India discuss COVID, Ukraine situation. Amid Russia's tough stand, four-way talk to begin in Paris. Political advisors to meet on January 25th. Right, and what do we have? But what's at stake in Ukraine is what Tanvi Madan writes, and this is for all our analysts who've not read it. It was in the Indian Express. What does she say? And she's from Brookings, India's project at the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C. What does she say? For one, it would hinder Delhi's interest in preventing further deepening of Russia's ties with China. Potential Russian military action against Ukraine and Western backlash would mean that Moscow will need Beijing's diplomatic support even more. Beyond the strategic challenge that a close Sino-Russian partnership poses for India, a Moscow that is more beholden to Beijing would be particularly problematic at the moment when India is dependent on Russian military supplies, and Sino-Indian border tensions could flare up again if Beijing asks Moscow to take some steps. What will Russia do at a time when its need for China is acute due to crisis with Ukraine? It's worth keeping in mind that in 1962, when Moscow needed Beijing's backing during the Cuban Missile Crisis, it resulted in Soviet support for ally China versus friend India at a crucial moment in the China-India war. Let's not forget that, folks. Russia, USSR, not your bum chums, buddy. Let's diversify media. I don't know why we bought that S-400. I mean, just look at this complications and contradictions, right? But another Russian invasion of Ukraine would put paid to any near-term prospect of a rapprochement between the West and Russia. And Japanese attempts have already been stymied by the Russian military buildup on the disputed Kuril Islands and the Sino-Russian military exercises. Further, Russian military action against Ukraine would complicate India's effort to maintain a delicate balance between its partnerships with the US, Europe, and Russia. Amazing, right? A worsening Russia-Ukraine conflict would also bring India, US and India-Europe contradictions on Russia to the fore. The Western response will involve even more sanctions that will further hinder India's ability to do business with Russia and diversify Russia-India ties. A deteriorating situation in Europe could draw US attention away from the Indo-Pacific theater as Afghan and Middle East did it in previous administration. This is the important part. A Russia-Ukraine crisis could also create headwinds for India's move to deepen security and economic ties with European partners. Moreover, in order to focus on the Russia challenge, European capitals could seek to stabilize ties with China rather than act against its assertive actions. This in turn could negatively affect the coordinated approach that Delhi seeks among like-minded partners to balance China. Furthermore, whether or not Beijing seeks to use the opportunity of the West being distracted to take further military action against India or elsewhere, China would benefit from American-European attentions focused on Russia's Ukraine rather than on Asia. Nonetheless, Moscow's justification for its actions against Ukraine are similar to those Beijing makes versus India. Historical claims, ethnic linkages, and Indian steps, and it says, threaten China. And Russia military action would go against respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty that Delhi frequently advocates. And hallelujah, Madan lady has put it just right where it is. I hope we guys are able to make the right call. Jai Shankar, get on the job! So obviously Ukraine not only puts India in a dilemma as it did Turkey, as I pointed out, but Turkey is out there stirring the pot everywhere. UK company report alleges war crimes in J&K, firm tied to Turkey acting on Pakistan's behalf. But this is why we keep getting into trouble in the Western world. Unregulated foreign aid could harm India's sovereignty, centered to Supreme Court, a very thin-skinned sarkar. Here, we've got to doing the right thing in the periphery. Modi, Mauritius PM launched social housing project worth 45 million. At least 3 killed in bomb blast in Lahore, and the Baloches take responsibility. So CPEC in trouble. Amid Lanka forex crisis, India offers 500 million line of credit. I wonder what the Chinese are doing. Escaping Janta, more Myanmar refugees cross over into Mizoram. If you saw my last two episodes ago on foreign policy, you can see why it's important for India to bring Myanmar on board. And I think India is going to have to support the people, right? China continues to be India's big problem. Pakistan-China road hurdle for demilitarization. Shishir Gupta, this is the road will connect Yarkand in Xinjiang to Muzaffarabad and POK through Shaksgam Valley. Arunachal boy abducted by China, says an MP. Strategic significance of bridge China is building on Pangong Tso, and the important part is the fingers on the North Bank have seen frequent clashes. Finger 4 was one of the first friction areas in the current standoff. And how does the bridge help China? Its main objective appears to be quick mobilization of PLA troops between the two banks at one of the lake's narrowest points. And now, like I said, Bahrain enters Indo-Pacific League. And as Tanvi Madan pointed out, that this invasion of Ukraine could put paid to this focus that Europe now has on China. So this is going to be very important. Bahrain enters Pacific League. It says the arrival of the German naval frigate Bahrain at the Mumbai port tomorrow marks a turning point, not just in India-German defense relations, but also in Germany's approach to the Indian Ocean. While critics may have dubbed it as an empty gesture, Germany has let it be known that it is responding both to China's increasing maritime assertiveness in the region and to pressure from the US to share more of the burden of defending the freedom of navigation and the law of the seas. With the Indo-Pacific becoming an important theater of rivalry between the US and China, European powers are beginning to make their presence felt. After recent French and British forces into the region, the Germans have also now raised their flag. China has made sharp remarks against the German initiative. Not to be deterred, the Scholz government has made 2 important announcements regarding future German activity in the region. One, Vice Admiral Schonsbach said in Tokyo in November 21 that he would be sending vessels into the Indo-Pacific every 2 years. Second, Scholz administration has also announced that the German Air Force will participate in the Royal Australian Air Force's multinational exercise Pitch Black this year. Germany plans to send 6 Eurofighters. Important. Signaling China's Bahrain visit would be expected to mark not just an important milestone in the evolving Indo-German defense relationship, but more widely in the emerging strategic partnership between India and the EU. And he had some very strong remarks. China acts as enemy to many, not as nice a nation as we thought Germany may be. Important part, folks, is Ukraine could create a huge problem, and because maybe that's why for China, if Russia invades Ukraine, it's probably manna from heaven, and India better be ready for a skirmish, a big push by the Chinese militarily on the Indian border as soon as the snow melts. So for India, this Ukraine issue can really be a problematic thing, right? So you have India's role critical in Biden's strategy on China, says US official. After almost 2 years of physical, emotional, psychological impact of this pandemic, for many of us, it's been too much to bear. Some people may call that happening now the new normal. I call it a job not yet finished. It will get better. And ride in tandem, Quad Summit likely in May. Indo-Pacific COVID in focus. US-Japan resolved to push back on China. In a virtual call, President Biden and PM Kishida also condemned North Korea's spate of missile tests. And then here's what? Tit for tat. US suspends 44 flights to China operated by Chinese carriers. Give it to them, folks. Give it to them. So here's it. Frailty of China. So they've got to see, analyze China's weaknesses. That's the important part. You don't really keep comparing your strength versus their strength. Okay, you're way behind, but you really do have advantages that you have to make use. And China does have negatives and weaknesses, and you got to make use of them. TK writes well. So why is China not learning from the experience that the world and learning to live with the virus instead of trying to kill it off whenever it raises its head? Important. It is just so that it's not just that the authorities would have to admit that the strategy they have been following and for which they have imposed tremendous pain on the Chinese people, shutting down cities with virtually no notice, was wrong. They would have to admit that China's COVID vaccines are not at all effective. Hear this. To live with the virus, the population must acquire herd immunity. For that, you have 2 choices. 1, let everyone get infected. Treat the very ill as much as your systemic capacity allows and cull the weak. 2, vaccinate the populace. For that, you need an effective vaccine. If China had to import vaccines from Pfizer or Moderna or even AstraZeneca, one from America's Anglosphere ally Britain, that would show Chinese weakness. To import vaccines from India would be unthinkable humiliation. That leaves the option of containing any outbreak with authoritarian zeal, counting on people's implicit trust in the wisdom of the Communist Party and its thoughtful leader. To admit mistakes in strategy is to lose the implicit trust. That's the problem, and that's what our Sarkar should also realize. You can't go take all of it yourself like he did the last time, Modi Sarkar, and bummed it all for himself. Millions of people have perished in the Soviet Union and China thanks to their communist dictators' policy, foibles, and authoritarian excesses. Capitalism flourished under authoritarian regime, true in Germany, Italy, Indonesia, Korea, Brazil, and Chile. But after a point, the contradiction between animal spirits and the urge of authoritarian regimes to tame them broke the regimes. In this case, he has learned a lesson and broken the animal spirit. China thinks it will prove an exception. It thinks slogans of common prosperity will legitimize the regime. The pandemic illustrates the fallacy of this make-believe. That's the opportunity for India, folks. Were the days, they never end, forever and a rain. So while China struggles, this is India's biggest advantage, right? Texas Lone Rangers versus COVID-19, written by letter from Washington by Seema Sirohi. She says no praise is enough for Peter Hotez and Maria Elena Bottazzi, the Texans who might yet rescue the world. He says Hotez and Bottazzi work pretty much as Lone Rangers to give a lifeline to millions of forgotten folks in poor countries. India's biologically, as one of their partners, is producing 100 million doses of Corbevax a month. India approved Corbevax for emergency use in December 21 and ordered 300 million doses. The regulatory process moved faster for obvious reasons. Corbevax is patent-free, travels with ease, and doesn't require deep refrigeration. Best of all, it costs only about $1.50 per dose compared to Pfizer or Moderna at whatever. Biologically plans to make 1 billion doses by the end of 22, a good number, but billions more are needed. Only 51% of the world is fully vaccinated, with Africa showing the lowest rate at 14%. Hotez called Indian vaccine manufacturers gift to the world. Now let's send the gift to as many people as possible. Hey China, smelling the rubber, running behind you, You got some advantages, folks. You gotta use them. Just let's not burn them in domestic policy, man. Just not let Shah destroy our foreign policy. More now. Next. So at the end, our biggest threat is China, right? So building a strategy of denial to thwart China. This is written by somebody called Elbridge Colby. Elbridge Colby is the author of The Strategy of Denial, American Defense in an Age of Great Power Conflicts. Yale University Press 2021 as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in 2017-18. This is the time, obviously, this is a building a strategy denial to thwart China. It's both for the United States and India. So what do they say? After many decades of hoping to avoid a rivalrous relationship with China, both the US and India now recognize China is their top security threat. Hallelujah. The question, though, is what is the strategy and how India and the US, as the two largest powers in the Indo-Pacific, other than China itself, can best put it into effect. Okay. The most acute danger is that China will use its military strength to collapse this coalition, especially as it sees in places like India and Australia the limits of economic leverage. Recognizing this, Beijing might try to target one or a few coalition states with its armed might to undermine confidence in the coalition's strength or will to defend its members. If Beijing were to succeed in bringing enough coalition countries to heel, other states in the coalition might seeing it as a hollow shell, cut deals with Beijing rather than face its focus of ire. So here, folks, India is the first line of defense. Frustrating this strategy requires a counter strategy of denial. Beijing will very likely need to directly attack and impose its will on the coalition state to convince it to give up core goods of independence and autonomy. In light of this, the coalition must at a minimum deny Beijing the ability to seize and hold the key territory of a targeted member state and more broadly enable it to stand up to any such Chinese demands to disaffiliate from its coalition and thereby fall under Beijing's sway. Many countries exposed to mighty China, including US allies in the region and Taiwan, need assurances they will be effectively defended to hold firm. Washington's credibility in particular is thus a precious asset which must be husbanded judiciously. Fortunately, though, this leaves a natural arrangement between the two primary military powers in the anti-hegemonic coalition. While US, Australia defend Taiwan, India defends South Asia. If China's military dominance is checked within the first island chain to include include Taiwan, it will be contained there, and Beijing will be forced to negotiate the terms of its continued rise rather than dictate them. This is, folks, the important part. Defend Taiwan, India goes after and controls South Asia, but definitely takes it through Tibet. Jai Hind.